What's up, guys? We're back with more picks and predictions. This weekend, we have UFC 310. It's the last pay-per-view of 2024. It's headlined by Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. Kai Asakura is making his debut fight in the UFC for the belt, for the flyweight championship. So, yeah, pretty interesting card. Initially headlined by Belal Muhammad and Shavkat Rakhmonov, but Belal Muhammad did get injured. So, we have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry in a 5-round co-main event for the number one contender in the welterweight division. And yeah, let's hop into the recap for UFC Macau and then jump right into the picks and predictions for this weekend. All right, so to recap UFC Macau, we had a red week. Last week we were down 1.45 units at UFC Macau, and as you can see, we only had 2 units in. On a low week for us, we normally go 3.5 units in. And on a card that I'm super confident, I maybe go 5 or just over 5 units in. So 2 units is like very low for me to put down, and I think it was mostly because a bunch of the fighters were road to UFC fighters, a bunch of UFC debuts and untested, unproven fighters, so there wasn't really many spots that I liked. We had the first fight started off well, hit Nicholas Mota at plus 175 odds, and then after that we had 3 other bets and they all kind of just fell apart. Figueiredo plus 5.5. Do regret that one. I think I just had a bunch of belief in Figgy to keep that fight close, but he wasn't able to do that. And then we had these two legs, got kind of unlucky, hit 2 out of these 4 fights, and they were just split up between these bets. So Ulberg won and Ming Yang Zhang won, but Xiao Kan Fang lost and Kong Wang somehow at like minus 1,000 lost. So pretty insane, but yeah. 1.7 units were in those 2. There was another 0.1 units on the Figueiredo plus 5.5. So, I mean, that bet lost, but there's basically nothing on that. And then 0.2 units on Nicholas Mota kind of made some of it back. So, down 1.45 units. And yeah, let's move on to the picks and predictions for UFC 310. To kick off the card, we got Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Lukasz Brzeski. This is going to be a pretty quick prediction. Kennedy Nzechukwu is a massive favorite, and it just makes sense. He's better everywhere than Lukasz Brzeski. He's also up a weight class. He used to fight at light heavyweight. Now he's fighting at heavyweight, so he has that lighter man skill going for him. He's literally better than Lukasz everywhere. I think the only, problem on the Nzechukwu side is maybe sometimes you might think his chin is a little suspect, but, I mean, there's no real danger here for Kennedy Nzechukwu, in my opinion. I think Lukasz Brzeski is pretty much a can. I think that anywhere this fight goes, Nzechukwu should be the one in control. He is making that pretty quick turnaround after he beat Chris Barnett, and, Chris Barnett did that dumb jump and got injured before the fight even started. So, interesting matchup, but Kenny Nzechukwu should get it done. Should be pretty easy. Not really much value in his betting line, and yeah, let's move on to the next one. Second fight on the card, we got Chase Hooper versus Clay Guida. Now, we're going back-to-back on massive favorites here. Chase Hooper is a minus 1,000 favorite against Clay Guida, and it makes sense. I mean, Clay Guida is 42, Chase Hooper's 25. That's going to be a pretty big reason. And then outside of that, we're seeing Chase Hooper's striking get better and better throughout his fights. I mean, he had that fight, his last fight, where he literally dropped Vyacheslav Borshev, which is pretty insane for him to drop him on the feet. I find that crazy. And then, Clay Guida, he does have, some pretty good work on the feet. He's, an old journeyman. He will be, hard to put away. But at the end of the day, Chase Hooper's grappling should be able to get this one done. I think that Clay Guida and Chase Hooper had a grappling match not too long ago. Chase Hooper did get him in a calf slicer in round 1. And then outside of that, if you look at this, Clay Guida's been submitted a bunch of times in his career. He got submitted by Jim Miller. He got submitted by Claudio Puelles as well. I think that the grappling will just be too much here. It makes sense, but I mean, Chase Hooper has also been cracked sometimes. He got cracked by Steve Garcia, got knocked out. So he can be cracked. If Clay Guida does do anything, it will be on the feet. But realistically, Chase Hooper is going to be able to get this one done. We're going to pick Chase Hooper, and yeah, let's move on to the next one. All right, now the next fight on the card, we got Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin. I'd be lying to you if I told you I really gave a fuck about this fight. I'm not going to lie, but this might be one of those ones where you go get some food mid-card. Jokes aside, though, I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa to win. I'm not going to be playing this fight, though. Michael Chiesa is 37 years old. Max Griffin's 39 years old. Michael Chiesa spends half his time doing, media stuff for the UFC, doing some broadcasting stuff. So, he's 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He is near the end of his career. He's coming off that win to the GOAT, Tony Ferguson. Got him in a rear naked choke. And then we got Max Griffin, who's coming off a win. Split decision to Jeremiah Wells. This is pretty grappler versus striker matchup. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to go with Chiesa. I think that Chiesa can get the takedowns on Max Griffin. And, Chiesa's 17-7 in his career. 6 of those 7 losses have been by submission, which is pretty interesting. I mean, I haven't seen someone that just loses to submission that often, to be honest. I think that's pretty rare. And then with Max Griffin, I think he has 1 submission win, and that's in 2014. So he's not really a submission type of guy in general. And seems like Michael Chiesa gets the fight done unless he does get submitted. I do think he gets it to the ground. Clearly, he's prone to making mistakes, but Max Griffin is probably not the person to go and exploit those mistakes. And yeah, I mean, if Chiesa can't get it to the ground, then Griffin will light him up on the feet. Chiesa's never been knocked out, but he is 37, so who knows? Maybe this is where he does get knocked out. Like I said, pretty degen fight to bet on, in my opinion. I think there's tons of better spots on this card. 37 and 39, they're just too old, too close to the end of their careers to kind of see who's going to come in there with the dog to go get it done. But I'm going to go with the grappling. I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa, and yeah, let's move on to the next one. All right, now, next fight on the card, we got Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. I'm actually really excited to watch this matchup. I think it's a really cool matchup. I'm pretty fond of both these fighters. I think they're both pretty fun to watch as well. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Cody Durden to beat Joshua Van this weekend. I think that Joshua Van is pretty good. The only thing is he's small, and he's small for flyweight. He is 5'5". It's going to make it pretty hard for him to, kind of stop Cody Durden's grappling, in my opinion. That's really what it comes down to. Now, Joshua Van on the feet is really fast. He has really good boxing. He got knocked out by Charles Johnson in round 3, but in that fight, he was winning the fight up until round 3, in my opinion. I think the judges' scorecards had it 1-1, if I'm not mistaken, or I think one judge had it 2-0 Johnson, one judge had it 2-0 Van, and then one judge had it 1-1. So it was real, dead even going into round 3. Pretty interesting matchup, but I mean, on the feet here against Cody Durden, Joshua Van it's going to be all him. It's just, can Joshua Van stop the wrestling from Cody Durden? And Cody Durden's going to have to know that he has to just basically go and spam takedowns against someone like Joshua Van. And I think that because Cody Durden will be much bigger, even though Joshua Van has displayed pretty good technical abilities when it comes to stopping takedowns, I think that Cody Durden should be able to just overpower him at some point in this matchup. Now, Cody Durden is kind of stupid, though. He does make mistakes, and he has got choked out on the ground a couple times. So Cody Durden himself can be submitted. And on the other side, Joshua Van, while he is not known for grappling, he does kind of do well everywhere. We've seen him on the ground. He can hold his own. So it is pretty interesting. I think that, this fight probably ends in a finish, in my opinion. On the feet, I definitely think Joshua Van can knock Cody Durden out, but I think that Durden is going to spam the grappling. I think he will do enough with the grappling to get the win, so I'm going to pick Durden. But like I said, this fight's probably going to end in a finish. Joshua Van is dangerous wherever it goes, and Cody Durden is susceptible to making mistakes, so it's kind of a bad combination. But yeah, we're going to pick Cody Durden. I think that the grappling is what's going to be the difference maker. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. All right, next fight on the card, we have the fight that I probably care the least for. It's Eryk Anders versus Chris Weidman. Now, I initially had picked Chris Weidman when this fight was booked for UFC 309. A lot of that, though, was around him being the hometown guy in New York. Fight was in Madison Square Garden. I thought that was going to play a pretty big role. And now that the fight's in Las Vegas and it's kind of just, in neutral territory, I think I'm actually going to flip my pick to Eryk Anders. I think that this fight's going to look super sloppy. I think this fight's going to look super boring. I don't think this fight's going to be cool at all. And on top of that, I would love to see Chris Weidman lose after what he did to Bruno Silva. I mean, he won against Bruno Silva, but we just saw Bruno Silva, be pretty ass against Nardiev, who's been in and out of the UFC, not even on a tear outside the UFC. He had a bunch of losses in Brave, literally in 2022. So Bruno Silva as an opponent is not really a crazy win at this point. He looked kind of checked out in his career in general. And, I just think it's going to be a super sloppy fight. A lot of clinching up against the cage. I just think Eryk Anders is just going to outwork Chris Weidman at the end. And I'd also love to see Chris Weidman lose just because all that eye poke bullshit and the way he kind of carried himself after the fight. I'm not going to be betting this fight. No way. I'm going to pick Eryk Anders. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. All right, up the card, we got Randy Brown versus Bryan battle. And now I'm pretty excited for this fight. Everyone's pretty excited for a Bryan battle fight. He normally keeps it pretty interesting. And I mean, Bryan battle recently has definitely shown not to be just a jiu-jitsu nerd. His striking is improving, and he does seem to have KO power. Not in maybe a one-punch knockout type of sense, but definitely in a volume of punches, getting someone out of there. He's coming off that KO of Kevin Gisette where he looked pretty good. Only thing that I would say knocking him on that performance is the fact that he did get hit a lot, so his head movement isn't the best. He does eat shots, but then he does eat one shot to give out two. So that's not bad. I mean, you can't really knock someone for doing that. But at the end of the day, with someone like Randy Brown as his opponent, you got to be careful because Randy Brown does have power. The way I really see this fight going is that I think that Randy Brown does like to stay on the outside. He will, be dangerous on the feet, but I think Bryan Battle just has more paths to victory. Bryan Battle is more active in the octagon. Bryan Battle throws more volume. I think everything kind of points to Bryan Battle. I was not really too high on Bryan Battle in this matchup. I was going to pick him always, but I was a little bit scared. I think as we're getting closer to the fight, I'm getting more and more confident in Bryan Battle. His line move has been pretty interesting too. He opened at a minus 250 where a lot of people disagreed that, that's kind of too high, it's too inflated for him. He then kind of moved down to a minus 170, minus 190. And then now he's kind of moving back towards that minus 250 side. I think he's sitting at minus 230 right now. So interesting line movement for Bryan Battle. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to pick Bryan Battle to get this one done. Like I said, I think he has more paths to victory. For the Randy Brown side, I think that, he can knock out someone like Bryan Battle, but Bryan Battle has shown to be able to eat shots and not go down. So we're going to go with Bryan Battle's chin. We're going to go with his volume. We're going to go with his potential jiu-jitsu if it does go to the ground. And yeah, let's move on to the next one. Up the card, we got Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling. This fight has been a big talk, at least in our Discord, and in a bunch of other places that I've been seeing. And I do find something interesting at why Movsar Evloev's line is where it is. I don't think that it's priced fully correctly, mostly because I'm actually not aware of too many people betting Aljamain Sterling. And from my knowledge, there's a fuck ton of money on Movsar just in general. That's like within our Discord and just, outside even our community, places that I've been looking. Seems like Movsar is, a consensus pick almost. And I find that pretty interesting. I mean, I know on Tapology it says 65-35, so there is still 35% of people picking Aljamain Sterling. It's just that I haven't interfaced with them, so that's something to note. And yeah, I mean, there is just a fuck ton of money that I know on Evloev. Maybe it's being offset by a bunch of Sterling bettors that just aren't in my network, but pretty interesting to note. But yeah, I will be picking Movsar Evloev to win this fight against Aljamain Sterling. And I think it's really fucking simple. I think that Aljamain Sterling's best path to victory here is to be able to, submit someone like Movsar Evloev. But the problem is that Movsar has better wrestling than Aljamain Sterling. So when it does come in those grappling type of instances throughout this fight, it's just Movsar's going to be able to dictate where that goes. And I think for Movsar Evloev, the path is very simple. Just force Aljamain Sterling to strike with you for 3 rounds, and you're going to win the fight. There's no way. I mean, Aljamain does have, like, good kicks, I guess, like side tier, some bullshit like that. But outside of that, like, there's no real threat on the feet for Movsar Evloev. He's going to be the better striker than Aljamain Sterling, and I think he just has the tools on the wrestling side, because he is the better wrestler, to just force Aljamain to strike with him. I mean, there's no reason for him to even use his wrestling offensively, in my opinion, because why put Aljamain Sterling in a place where, he could potentially pull off some type of submission? But yeah, I mean, outside of Aljamain trying to backpack him, like, do you really see someone like Movsar Evloev being backpacked? Because I don't. I think that this is very simple. Movsar Evloev is even the younger fighter as well. Everything kind of points in his direction, which is why I'm kind of curious as to why line movements have been so drastic for other fights. While it seems like this fight, initially, when it first opened at minus 170 before it even got rescheduled, I thought that was a pretty crazy price for Movsar. So it did shift to minus 250 pretty quick, but once it's sitting at minus 250, it hasn't really moved much, which is still interesting to me considering that other fighters have moved quite a bit. Just something to note, I'm still going to pick Movsar. These are just random things that, you might keep in mind. I'm going to pick Movsar. I think this is a very straightforward matchup for someone like Movsar. Just don't let him take your back, and you have the wrestling tools to, not allow that. Just force him to strike, and you will win the striking. And yeah, let's move on. All right, now up the card, we move to Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo. This is going to be another fight that, I might not spend too much time on. I think that the breakdown for this fight is pretty simple. Vicente Luque is the more skilled fighter out of these guys. The question with Vicente Luque is just, how is he recovered after his injury in that Jeff Neal fight? He just took so much damage. I mean, he's only 33 years old going into this fight, but man, this guy's career, he definitely is going to fight as he's a lot older than 33, especially with that brain injury he suffered in that Jeff Neal fight in 2022. I think it just took so much off his career. And then he's coming off a knockout loss, I should say, earlier this year to Joaquin Buckley. And Buckley has been surging through the rankings in that welterweight division. So it's not like a bad loss per se. It's more, where is, Luque's durability at this point in his career? Is that something that, he's going to be able to keep up with? Themba Gorimbo is going to be a hungry contender in this matchup. Like I said, skill for skill, I mean, I still like Luque a lot, but Themba Gorimbo, who's also 33, is going to look and feel a lot younger in this fight than Vicente Luque, especially because of the damage that Luque's, aggregated over the time of his career. I'm going to pick Gorimbo to win. I haven't laid any money down on this fight yet. I'm pretty curious. I think that, Gorimbo does have a pretty good ground game, but we haven't really seen someone on Gorimbo's level be able to come in and just dominate Vicente Luque on the ground. And then when it comes to the striking, Gorimbo's going to be wild. Luque is going to be more, composed, more technical. But Gorimbo does throw some wild strikes up on the feet. I think, like I said, it's going to come down to what you think of Luque's durability. If you think he can turn back the clock and you like Luque as a dog, I don't personally hate that, but I'm going to take Themba Gorimbo to win the fight. I haven't, like I said, laid any money down on this just yet. Maybe I will throughout the week, but interesting line movement here. Gorimbo's getting cheaper and cheaper every day, so that's something to watch. Yeah, let's move on to the next one. All right, now up the card, we have Anthony Smith versus Dominick Reyes. When it comes to this fight, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I would love to see Dominick Reyes win, but to be completely honest, I don't really care for this fight. I think that Anthony Smith probably loses this fight, and then he should retire after that. But Dominick Reyes, especially in 2024 at minus 300, is definitely not something I'm going to lay money down on. Be my guest if you want to do that. But, the reason why I do like to pick Dominick Reyes in this type of fight is because with someone like Anthony Smith, there's not really much danger coming back at you, especially not on the feet. And then do you see Anthony Smith, just like out wrestling, out working, out grappling Dominick Reyes? Probably not. I mean, he does have a good gas tank, but we're not really used to seeing Dominick Reyes like dominate on the ground. The problem with Dominick Reyes is the fact that, his chin is just absolutely shot, especially after that Ryan Spann loss. Like, it just looked really bad, just getting dropped by a jab in the first round. But then, he comes back and gets a knockout in round 1 against Dustin Jacoby, which is pretty good. So, I'd like to see Dominick Reyes win as a fan. Like I said, though, in 2024 at minus 340, there's no chance I'm betting Dominick Reyes. I'm going to pick him to win. If you want to bet this fight, go ahead. I think that's pretty degen. Both these guys are pretty old. Both these guys are pretty experienced, so we'll see what happens. But Dominick Reyes, realistically, is a better fighter. I don't think that Dominick Reyes gets dominated on the ground. And when it comes to standing up, I mean, Dominick Reyes should be quicker, lighter on the feet, and just be able to kind of outstrike Anthony Smith. And the good thing is, in this matchup, I don't think there's much danger coming back his way, at least on the feet, when it comes to someone like Anthony Smith. So yeah, Dominick is going to be the pick. I think it's pretty decent to bet on this, and let's move on. All right, and to kick off the main card, we got Nate Landwehr versus Choi. This is a pretty sick fight to kick off the main card. I know that a lot of people are upset with the way this card is set up, especially with the Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling fight being on the prelims. And then you have Nate Landwehr and Choi on the main card, and then you also have Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. I think that's much more of like a problem to be on the main card. Like, I don't know why the hell Kron Gracie is even getting Bryce Mitchell as an opponent. I think that's and why that's on the main card on top of that. It's pretty interesting, but, we'll talk about that fight later. Let's break down Nate Landwehr versus Choi. I'm going to pick Nate Landwehr to win this fight. I do like Nate Landwehr quite a bit, and I just think that, Nate the Train should be able to get it done. Both these guys are going to put on a banger performance, though, aside from them just, not being maybe the biggest names, especially not to, like, maybe a casual fan, but these guys are going to put on an absolute banger to open this card. We know both these guys are down to just go in there and throw hands. And when it comes to that, I just think that, Choi, I think he's going to give it a lot, especially early on. But I think the cardio for Nate Landwehr is really just going to come through later on. I think Nate Landwehr has a better chin as well. And, Nate Landwehr has some pretty solid wins under his belt. I mean, he's got a win over David Onama. David Onama's been looking good. Maybe in his last fight, he looked a little bit shaky. But, David Onama's been looking good in general. Ludovic Klein has been looking really good. He's got a win over Ludovic Klein, David Onama. So these are good names to have wins over. His last loss was in 2023 to Dan Ige. But, there's no real downside to losing to someone like Dan Ige. I mean, maybe you might not be built for the top 10 in the division, but Nate Landwehr is definitely up there. And Choi, he's getting losses to people that are not really at that level. I mean, he's lost to Charles Jourdain, but I guess that was in 2019. So yeah, I mean, he did have that long ass layoff, so maybe I gotta, consider that. But since he's come back from the layoff, it's the draw to Kyle Nelson and then win against Bill Algeo. Not horrible. I just think that Nate Landwehr has just got the better wins. We know both these are going to come in and throw down. Like I said, I think Nate Landwehr does have the better cardio as well. So I'm going to lead Nate the Train. Let's move on to the next one. All right, now, next one on the card is the Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie fight. Pretty surprised that this fight is booked here. I mean, I don't think this fight even makes much sense. To break it down, Bryce Mitchell 16-2. His 2 losses are to Josh Emmett, where he did get knocked out late last year, and that knockout was actually vicious. He was convulsing on the ground for a little bit. It was in the first round. And, good thing he did take a bunch of time off. That was in December of 2023. So taking a full year off, which I think makes a ton of sense after a knockout like that. And then prior to that, his only other loss was a submission loss to Ilia Topuria. Nothing wrong with that. Ilia Topuria is obviously the champion. Absolutely disgusting. So, nothing wrong with losing to Ilia Topuria. But, I mean, outside of that Josh Emmett knockout, he's been doing pretty well. He beat his wins over Edson Barbosa, Dan Ige, Andre Fili. So, not bad competition, especially that Dan Ige win is, pretty good. in 2023. So Bryce Mitchell does have some good wins. He is a pretty like powerful wrestler. That's going to be his main thing. He does wrestle a lot. And it's going to be interesting because this is a fight where he might actually, for once, be the better striker in the matchup, which is normally not the case for Bryce Mitchell. And then on the other side, Kron Gracie, I mean, like I said, Bryce Mitchell has 2 losses, and they're Josh Emmett, Ilia Topuria. Kron Gracie has 2 losses, and they're Cub Swanson and Charles Jourdain. So, I mean, he lost to Cub Swanson in 2019, took a 4-year layoff, fought Charles Jourdain, and lost a unanimous decision, and to be honest, looked pretty trash in doing so. All he really can do in this matchup is probably pull guard and try to use his jiu-jitsu. I don't think that, Bryce Mitchell, being a good wrestler, probably shouldn't allow him to, put him in any of those weird scenarios. Kron Gracie might try to pull guard. But I actually think that for Bryce Mitchell in this fight, you kind of just stand and strike with this guy. Kron Gracie's striking is absolutely atrocious. Just strike with him, and you probably just win this fight, which is not something Bryce Mitchell is used to. Like I said, he's normally not the better striker in the matchup, but I think this time he probably will be. And yeah, I think he just kind of does that. If he does decide to wrestle, though, that is kind of going into Gracie's world just a little bit, where he does have the option to use his jiu-jitsu. But, I mean, I'm not really worried about Kron Gracie. I think that Bryce Mitchell should be able to win. He has a bunch of quality wins that Kron Gracie could never, imagine in his career. And yeah, we're going to move on to the next one. All right, now I'm pretty interested in this next fight on the card. We have Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. I think this is actually a pretty good matchup, but I'm going to be picking Cyril Gane to win this fight. I'm not high on Volkov, and I'll tell you why. Cyril Gane and Volkov have fought before, obviously, and Cyril Gane literally 50-45 this guy. On top of that, I just know that in their last fight, Volkov shot 0 takedowns. I think it was actually Cyril Gane that shot a few takedowns in that matchup, if I remember correctly. So Volkov shot no takedowns, and I mean, prior to his performance against Sergey Pavlovich, which was actually a pretty good performance, he did, his wins are versus Alexander Romanov. I mean, I think Romanov's a bum, to be honest. Pretty sure he got cut after a win, if I'm not mistaken, from the UFC. So, yeah, he beat Rodrigo Nascimento and got cut literally a few weeks ago. So, I think Romanov's a bum. He beat Tai Tuivasa, but we know that Tai Tuivasa is pretty fraud. Tai Tuivasa was doing well, but he kind of got fraud checked 4 times in a row. And then the Sergey Pavlovich win, like I said, it's a pretty good win. Sergey Pavlovich before this lost to Tom Aspinall and Alistair Overeem, so there's only 2 losses. So he has some pretty good losses. And then, he loses to Alexander Volkov. So I just think that the Volkov stick and move, stay at range that he did against Pavlovich, that's just not going to work on Gane. We've seen this play out before. Standing up with Gane is a problem. Francis and Gane did not want to stand up with Gane. Those guys turned that into a wrestling match. And, I was watching that fight, and Cyril Gane made one bad mistake in round 5 going for a heel hook in which he lost position in what was a really tight round. But I think if he doesn't do that, he beats Francis Ngannou in that fight. He actually just made a bonehead decision. And then obviously people put a bunch of stock in the way he lost to John Jones. But I mean, that's John Jones, man. I just think that Alexander Volkov has not shown that he can go in and, just dominate Cyril Gane on the ground. He didn't do it last time. I don't see him doing it this time. And if anyone thinks that Gane is losing this fight on the feet, I think that's fucking crazy. We know how good Gane is standing up, how good of a kickboxer he is. So, I mean, if Volkov comes in, wrestles hard, and is able to take him down, then yeah, I think Volkov has a path. I just personally don't see him doing that. Pretty interested in this matchup, like I said. I'm going to go with Gane to get the win. Yeah, let's move on. All right, and in the co-main event, we have Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Machado Garry. This is a pretty good matchup. It's the number 1 contender fight for the welterweight belt since Bilal Muhammad obviously had to withdraw with an injury. That fight was initially scheduled with Shavkat Rakhmonov. And I'm going to go with Shavkat to win this fight. I think that, Shavkat's going to have a bunch of early pressure. The one interesting thing in this fight, though, is can Shavkat go 5 rounds? I think just with his style, he's going to be, just very aggressive, always coming forward. So that style is going to be interesting to see for 5 rounds. But aside from that, I'm going to give it to Shavkat. I think that Ian Garry's plan in this fight is probably going to be, be in and out, stick and move, not stay not let Shavkat get close to him throughout the fight. I just don't think he's going to be able to, execute that over 5 rounds. It's going to be really hard. And, I mean, we saw Ian Garry, kind of go to the ground with MVP and stuff like that. But while you could say someone like Ian Garry is decently well-rounded, I think it's a lot different when you're fighting someone like Shavkat. I think the ground game from Shavkat is not going to be on, some of these other strikers' levels, like an MVP type of ground game where he can kind of just obviously outdo MVP in the grappling. I don't think that's I think that's levels below what Shavkat's going to bring to the table here. So Shavkat's going to be moving forward. I think I don't really see Ian Garry getting knocked out here. I think the finish is going to be by submission. But to be honest, who knows? Maybe this even goes to a decision if Ian Garry tries to stay extremely safe and not take any risks and just kind of be like, okay, I might lose this, but I'm not going to get finished. Maybe he makes that decision later on in the fight. But I'm going to pick Shavkat to win. I think that forward pressure is going to get to Ian Garry. And I think that eventually Shavkat's going to get his hands on Ian Garry. And going to the ground is going to be the way that Shavkat wins this fight. So Shavkat's going to be the pick. I think he does get it done. And yeah, we'll move on to the main event. All right, now in the main event, we have Alexandre Pantoja defending his flyweight belt against newcomer Kai Asakura. Kai Asakura is making his UFC debut. Prior to this, he was fighting in a promotion in Japan called Risen. I do believe it's in Japan. If it's in some other Southeast Asian country, don't kill me in the comments. But yeah, he's coming from Risen, and he's now fighting for the flyweight championship in his UFC debut. Pretty interesting. I mean, yeah, I can kind of get why the UFC wants to do this. Kai Asakura is a pretty big name out there in Southeast Asia. That's a market that the UFC does want to enter. So it does make a ton of sense. And if you are playing the business game here and you'd be like, oh, you know what? The UFC would want Kai Asakura to win. I can see how you can build narratives in your head as to why that would happen. Personally, though, I'm going to pick Alexandre Pantoja to win this fight. I think that when it comes to this matchup, Pantoja, obviously on the feet versus Kai Asakura, will probably lose like a striking match. But this is MMA, and I think the grappling is where the path to victory does lie for Pantoja. Now, the one thing that I do want to mention when it comes to something like this is that you kind of have to figure out what you want to pick your poison in this type of pick. I do think that someone like Kai Asakura, you probably don't go see him getting dominated on the ground. But the caveat to that is that he's fighting in Risen. This is a completely different ball game. You're now fighting the best of the best in the UFC. Alexandre Pantoja, on top of that, is one of the best grapplers, if not the best grappler in this division right now. So, pretty interesting. If you are going to fight a grappler, it's kind of hard to give the tag of good takedown defense to someone like Kai Asakura because he's coming from Risen. But it's also unfair to say Kai Asakura does not have good takedown defense because, just because he hasn't fought maybe someone who does have good takedowns to kind of give him that strap. So, interesting. Like I said, it's a pick your poison type of scenario. And me personally, I'm going to pick the tried, the tested, the proven, which is Alexandre Pantoja. On top of that, I mean, there's a few key things that I would want to point out. One is that, Kai Asakura is not this person that's absolutely dominating and walking through people at Risen. I mean, he literally has losses in Risen as well. His last loss was in 2021, but he's only fought 3 times since then. A loss to Hiromasa Ugikubo, sorry if I butchered that name, and then he's got 2 wins after that loss, one in 2023, both of them coming in 2023. So he's coming off a year layoff. He's into a new promotion across the world. Also, new weight class is going to be a bigger weight cut for him. He is 1 weight class above this generally. So new weight class, new promotion. On top of that, like I said, he has some losses in Risen as well. And I think you kind of have to break this down as to do you see Alexandre Pantoja losing to these people? Do you see him, just do a little bit of MMA math. Do you see Alexandre Pantoja not dominating in that scenario? And I actually think that while Alexandre Pantoja doesn't have the most dominant fight style, I don't see him losing to those fighters. So with someone like Kai Asakura, you could say styles make fights, and if Asakura just stays standing, he wins this fight. I don't think it's that simple. I think you do have to take into account the experience. You have to take into account the level of competition. I mean, he literally has wins over strikers like Brandon Moreno, who I think are a lot more technical, a lot more clean strikers than Kai Asakura. I think Asakura is a bit more wild, a bit quicker. But, I mean, I definitely think Brandon Moreno is a more clean striker than Kai Asakura. And, we've seen Pantoja beat people like that. So I'm going to go with Pantoja. I do think he can get the takedowns. The only worry I do have, though, is the fact that if Kai Asakura is just a lot fucking bigger than him, where the takedowns do become a problem and the grappling does become a problem, then that's going to be interesting because, like I said, he fights a weight class above. On top of that, if he rehydrates, not if, he's going to rehydrate for sure. So we'll see how he rehydrates. We'll see how he looks on fight day. That's going to be interesting. But outside of that, I'm going to pick Pantoja. I'm going to pick the UFC guy. I don't think these debut guys are going to come in and take the belt. And yeah, that wraps up the picks and predictions for UFC 310. All right, guys, that does it for all the picks and predictions for UFC 310 in Las Vegas this weekend. This is the last pay-per-view of 2024. We've had a great 2024 when it comes to betting. We have one more card after this, UFC Tampa, and then we hit cards in the new year. Cards in the new year are going to be really good, so I definitely think you guys should tap in. Obviously have a great holiday. I don't know why I'm talking about the holidays just yet. We still have a card after this, but, definitely tap in. The end of the year gets rough in general, and, the new year is always fire. There's always all these fights coming back in, none of these contractual obligations that they put on in these fight nights and stuff like that. So definitely tap in. This is a pretty underrated card, though. I'm pretty excited for this card in general. I think it's going to be a pretty good fight. I think all the fights are pretty good, I should say. And yeah, definitely if you guys do want to check out Premium, we're up over 20 units in the last 11 weeks or something like that. We've been absolutely killing it, and we've been super transparent with our results as well. We're coming off a loss in UFC Macau on that bullshit. I got to get out of the women's MMA game. That's something I got to do for sure. With, Kong Wang losing at -1,000 and Shao Kahn Fang was -2,000 going into round 3. Then she gets knocked out. So yeah, we lost a unit, 1.4 units on that card. And then prior to that, UFC 309 was a kind of a break-even card. We lost 0.06 units, so basically nothing. And then outside of that, before that, we're on an 8 card win streak of just absolutely printing units. So we've been going absolutely insane, up 20 units, including all these, including the 1 unit loss from last card. So definitely check out Premium. It's on kopicks.win. It is $20 a month. Obviously, join our Discord. Our Discord is absolutely free. We've got a super nice community in Discord. You can talk about any bets you're placing in there, break down any fights. Just talk to UFC fans in general. So definitely join the Discord, completely free. I'm going to be active in the Discord myself. You can DM me if you have any questions about Premium or any questions in general. And yeah, check out our Instagram. Keep an eye on YouTube. And yeah, definitely, good luck on all your bets this weekend. I'll see you guys for the next card.